What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to the Cutlass Board Games channel, and we do a lot of Blood on the Clocktower content on here. In fact, some of our best performing videos are about giving tips to budding storytellers to run their own games, talking about stuff like balanced setups of Trouble Brewing, some of the other scripts, looking at script building, looking at playing with custom characters. But recently, with my regular play group of mostly advanced-ish players, we've had a bunch of brand new people come along, and so we've been playing some Trouble Brewing, which I maintain is the best script. But I wanted to do some tips and talk a little bit about what it's like doing setups for advanced players. And the reason why I think this is important is back in the day, way back when, I was part of the team that ran the regular Sydney Clocktower meetup. We would do it, twice a month or something. And it was like 70% brand new players most of the time, and then a couple of veterans that would come every week. And the first game, while you're kind of waiting for everyone to show up, would be Trouble Brewing. And then afterwards, we would split, and we'd have the advanced players go and play Sex and Violets or Bourbon Rising, and then the beginner players and any new beginner players that showed up would play Trouble Brewing again. But because of that, and I'm not always running a game, I might be playing in that first game, that meant that the vast majority of games that I had played of Trouble Brewing were setups for beginners. And so to this day, I've never played as the spy, but I've played as the widow, because the widow is much more likely to be given out as it belongs on an advanced script. When it comes to Trouble Brewing, the spy is a really underplayed character, because if you're a brand new player, you look at the whole grimoire and you're like, what the hell does this mean? I don't understand any of these things. And so I thought it would be an interesting idea to come through and have a look at some ideas about building setups for advanced players in Trouble Brewing, because I believe there's a lot of depth to the script and there's a lot that we can explore here. So let's open up our character, select characters. So at the moment I have a 10-player setup loaded on here, which guarantees we're going to have the imp, and we have no outsiders on default. Actually, let's do an 11. Let's start with an 11 first. Add a player. Go back to select characters. Cool. So 11 gives us one outsider. One of the other things that I should preface is that there's a weird sentiment that I kept bumping into of players that disliked the 10-player and 13-player count, because the difference between 9 and 10 was just plus the Baron and there was no other change. The outsider count would stay the same. And the difference between 12 and 13 was the same. They were just like, oh, it just guarantees the Baron is added. There's always going to be 2 outsiders. And I thought that was really strange. This is never a thing that I've thought about the game. And so I thought it was weird to encounter people in that way. And so in playing a 10-player game, I'm much more likely to do Spy Poisoner than I am to play the Baron. I like playing the Baron in the higher play count ones, like 13, 14, because it fills out the numbers nicely. But so we have one outsider. A lot of the time, people will always choose the drunk. I don't necessarily believe that the drunk is super necessary. The other thing is that you need to consider how everything comes together as part of the puzzle. The drunk is a -1, whereas the other outsiders, it is kind of a 0, right? I'll explain exactly what I mean by that in a little bit, but we need to look at how all of the information is going to connect, and then I'll go through and do all the reminder tokens and show it all line up and stuff. But I want to do something similar to a game that I ran previously for this first rack up, which was Investigator sees the spy between the spy and the Undertaker. This is correct information, but without adding any misinformation to the game, it makes the Undertaker really difficult to believe, which I think is really good. It's potentially damaging to the good team without adding drunkenness or poisoning, and without making the spy misregister as something. The most common way to use the spy is to misregister them, use a librarian to confirm them, use something like that, which I like, I rate. I rate that. And so like this, I think was a slightly more interesting setup. For this, I would include the fortune teller. And then librarian butler, I believe, was what I had in that specific game. I think the play count was slightly different. It might have been 8. I'm not sure. But we're going to do something similar for 11. If we do, so we have 2 choices. If we do Scarlet Woman, I would want to add Slayer. If we do Poisoner, I want to add more info characters. I think Empath is fine. I like Empath in games with greater than 8 players because the maths fits a bit better for them to be less likely to sit next to the demon. I don't think Chef will ever get relevant information here. I like the Raven Keeper. We had a game previously which was Spy Poisoner, and they set up and hit the Raven Keeper, and the Raven Keeper selected a player that had been seen by a bluff investigator, the Poisoner bluffed investigator, and then I showed the Poison Raven Keeper the same thing that the investigator had said, and so that can be kind of devastating, potentially. I think I don't really like playing Virgin with the Spy. I think I'm much more likely to do something like the Mayor and the Monk. So the Monk is really interesting. If the demon doesn't kill it right away, the Spy can't stop the Monk from protecting people. The Poisoner can poison lock them, but it means that information gets through. So let's say this is our 11. Let's send him out, and let's set up our reminder tokens. So in this scenario, we are going to have Librarian correct on the Butler, and then we want to put an incorrect somewhere. I think it's fine. I think actually if I put the incorrect. So one of the things to consider when it comes to who you're giving what is that the person will have to go and talk to those 2 people. If you give someone a role and you make them go and talk to a particular person, that particular person knows that characters in play. With the Spy, this is a bit less relevant, but if I make a washwoman go and talk to the imp and be like, hey, are you the Undertaker? The imp goes, oh, there's an Undertaker in play. And so that is another thing to consider when you're picking who these things are going to be. If I make the not Butler, the empath, who is sitting next to the Butler, getting a 1, the empath goes, I'm not the Butler, but I know there's a Butler in play. Person next to them goes, I'm the Butler, I'm confirmed by the Librarian. They now see next to Poisoner getting a 1. Poisoner suddenly is in a bad position. This is more good favored doing the setup like this. I think generally doing this as well is possible. The other option is to make the Spy register. I could just show the Spy as the Butler also, and the Butler as the Butler also. That could also be funny. Where it's the Librarians or the Spy and the Butler. But that is not what I'm going to go and do here, because the investigator, as I said before, is going to see the Spy and the Undertaker as the Spy, which I believe is potentially damaging without it specifically being misinformation. I want to think about what bluffs I want to include as well, so I'll get to that in a second. But we have our Librarian, we have our Investigator split, we have our Fortune Teller red herring to pick out. Is interesting. I actually like red herring investigator here. Advanced players will expect certain characters to be red herrings. Saint is a common one, Mayor is a common one, and then some of the heavy information roles are also common choices. I really like making the investigator the red herring here, because the investigator is setting up a spy narrative and potentially discrediting an Undertaker. If this person starts to look evil and people think that they are the demon, this might give the Undertaker credibility and make people actually believe the Undertaker is on the good team or whatever. But them being believed to be a spy is really damaging, is really scary. And so it's just going to come down to who the fortune teller picks, who the poisoner picks here. And then I think the monk is really interesting as well. The spy sitting next to the poisoner means that the poisoner is going to be very powerful. It is quite likely that the Undertaker will not be poisoned. The empath might get a 1 early, and then unless if they execute the poisoner, they might poison lock the empath. Otherwise, they might poison lock the monk, which I think would be interesting. But if the spy gets the Grimoire to the imp, it is likely that the monk will die early, the fortune teller will die early, the empath will possibly get the poisoner killed really early, and the spy can register good to the empath. So the spy is probably safe, but the spy is not a good star pass target either, which I think is good. I think this is balanced. I think that the evil team has very powerful influence over information, but by the seating of the empath, the good team has an advantage, which I think is okay, right? Let's clear it. Yep. Let's do another one, but we're going to add a player. So this is 12. Select characters 12. So let me clear. Cool. So this is going to be 2 outsiders by default. Adding a Baron here is really brutal. I actually really like a passive evil team where we go like this. We do Barons. There's 4 outsiders. It's a 12-player game. So 4, 7. There's 5 townsfolk, which means we want all the good big info townsfolk. I would say I think Investigator might be too brutal here. I think Librarian being the drunk getting a 0 would be hilarious, but it's obviously impossible. So I think, unless if I make the Investigator see the Recluse, could work, could potentially work like that. I like Chef here. I think that's fine. I think Slayer is also fine because I have the Skullman. Let's throw them out there. Let's have a look. Okay, so Chef is getting a 0 because we have our. Oh my god. So we're going to give our empath a 2. That's going to be kind of funny. Under my shoulder over here is the Saint, and we have the Chef next to that. I didn't end up putting in the Librarian, so I don't need to worry about where the outsiders are sitting, where they're pretty well spread out. But I need to figure out who the drunk is going to be, and I want to pick someone with the Investigator. I think if the Investigator picks a Scarlet, we're in trouble. I wanted the Investigator to pick the Recluse, but the Empath 2, and then one of the neighbors being Investigator. Oh, I forgot to do buffs for the last setup. I'll make sure I do buffs for this setup. I think giving the Librarian. I think I want to. I want to see the demon be like, I'm the Librarian, I saw someone, and then just find an outsider somewhere. Would be kind of good. Otherwise, Mare and Ravengiver. I think Ravengiver is fine here. If this Scarlet Woman dies and the Imp Star passes, I think the Baron catching it would be probably fine. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to, sorry, that has to be Minion. Make the Recluse register as a poisoner to the Investigator, and then make the wrong the Saint. I think this is fine. Okay, so this gives an interesting narrative to unravel, right? Because the Saint is on wrong. The Skullwoman is next to them. We have an empath of the 2. So the empath goes, okay, next to me are two evil players. The investigator comes out and says one of your neighbors is evil and the poisoner, or the saint, which is next to one of your neighbors, is evil. And the chef pipes up and goes, I have a 0. So the saint and the scarlet woman can't both be evil, according to my chef information. Which means the recluse is most likely to die, and then the empath will get a 1. I think that's fine. I think that's okay. I still need to pick a red herring. I think this is a tough one, right? Like the saint's the classic, and the saint has already been pinged as the poisoner. I don't want to make the undertaker. I actually like the butler as a red herring. I did butler as a red herring in a recent game, and they were never seen by the fortune teller, but randomly people were like, yeah, this person's reading is hella evil. I'm like, they're the butler, they haven't done anything. Why? And there's this weird meta about the game where people were like, the butler would never be played. And you're like, well, okay. Unless if it's specifically a Baron game where all 4 outsiders are in play, people are going to struggle to believe the butler, which I think is fine. But I need to pick my drunk. I think that is tougher. The other option is I make the empath drunk, give them a 0, which creates a different narrative with how the investigator works, and then I would maybe change that. The other thing is I could just really set them up running down a tunnel where I make the chef the drunk. I give the chef a 1 so that the saint scarlet woman pair, they're like, oh, maybe we do have to kill the saint. And we really put the pressure on the saint. I think this is a choice that I would only make if I was really confident that the saint could convince everyone that they're on the good team. It is possible. People can do that. But it would be really interesting in that way because the chef goes, I got a 1, and the empath goes, well, I got a 2, so some of these people have to be evil. And the investigator's like, well, here's how they all knit together. But the other thing that's interesting about that is that the heat map of where all the conversations, so what's happening is on this left-hand side, and the imp's just sitting across from everyone going like, oh no, evil players over there. Oh, geez, let's get them, I guess. And so it's quite likely that the Slayer will shoot in this direction, and then the Undertaker will start to see what some of these people were. So it's really unlikely the Scarlet Woman will activate, but the Imp is relatively safe with the Ravenkeeper bluff, or hitting a good Librarian bluff. They can potentially pass to the Baron, and the Baron can take it home. So I think this is pretty balanced. The minions are taking a lot of attention, right? And the Imp is pretty clear. A lot of it's just going to come down to who the fortune teller sees, whether the red herring activates, because if they hit both their neighbors, they're going to get a yes. And then if they pick one of their neighbors and someone else, they're going to get a yes. So it's fully possible to get a lot of yeses in this setup, because the evil players that will register as the demon are relatively equidistant in this top corner. So I think this is fine. I think this works nicely. And then you can kind of guess, kind of understand where the impact is going to be, where the thinking is going to be. But let's clear this one a yes, and let's change our player count. Let's go down to 10. Let's go down to 10. We're going to clear this also. We're going to do another spy setup, but we're doing it for 10. Let's do spy Baron. What real outsider do I want? I think Saint. The outsiders in Trouble Brewing is really interesting to me. I really like having a butler and pairing them up with a librarian, because librarian goes, I know you're the butler, and the butler goes, I can trust you as a master. And so this is like actually good and interesting gameplay to me. The Saint, I think, works really nicely for advanced players, because they go, I'm now issued with the challenge of all challenges. I have to convince everyone I'm good. The Recluse for advanced players is a shut-off character. They go, oh, whatever. I guess I'll get myself executed. You know, I need to make myself not look like a demon candidate as soon as possible. And so I think either they're the two scenarios that I would want to set up. I either do Librarian Butler, or I'll do the Saint and I'll put the Drunk somewhere. In this scenario, I've done this before where I had a 7, I think it was a 7-player game, no outsiders. Baron added Saint and Drunk Librarian. Librarian received 0. And the Saint comes out, and the Librarian goes, oh, I trust you 100%. I have to be the Drunk. There can be no other misinformation in this game. I'm the Drunk added by the Baron. You're the Saint. Instead of the Librarian at face value going, I got a 0. There's not supposed to be a Saint. You have to be lying. So I could also just do that here, right? Like we just remove the Baron, the Librarian gets a legitimate 0. And they go, oh, it's not a Baron game. But we give Saint as one of the bluffs, maybe. Or we give 2 outsiders as bluffs. And we play Poisoner. I think in this scenario, I'm wary of running Spy Poisoner all of the time. So I think Skullman Slayer might be better here. Especially if I'm doing a Librarian 0 play. I then need to pick like, yeah, I'll do a Spy Baron 1 after this maybe. But I want to investigate the Librarian 0 setup. I think this is one where we skip the Fortune Teller. I like the Undertaker and I like the Empath. 10 isn't so bad for the Empath, and I do potentially have the Poisoner. I'm then going to need do I want Washerwoman? What do I want to Washerwoman? This is slightly tough. I think I like Chef here. This might be too much top 4. Maybe instead of Washerwoman, we go like this. Instead of Monk, we play Ravenkeeper. All right, let's try this. Okay, so go away. Let me close this thing. Okay. First of all, Chef is getting a 1 because we have the Poisoner and the Scarlet Woman sitting next to each other. Underneath my shoulder, you can see the Underkeeper, the Undertaker, and the Ravenkeeper, who are combined to make the Underkeeper. We've got our Librarian, who is going to receive a 0. So they go, either I'm the Drunk or it's not a Baron game. But I'm going to give Saint Butler Fortune Teller. I like this as the bluffs. Which means that if the bluffs get handed out, at least one evil player will possibly be claiming an outsider. However, the evil team, knowing the play count and knowing there's not a Baron in play, knows none of the outsiders are in play. So this is me giving the evil team a really punishing setup. But it's also me indicating to them how I've set up the Librarian. Which I think is fine. Don't need to. So the Empath is also going to be getting a 1. But that's actually funny. The Empath goes, hey neighbor, I'm getting a 1. Can you claim to me? And they go, well, I'm the Slayer. What if I just shoot the other guy? The Slayer kills the Imp. And then the Scarlet Woman picks up the Imp, which means instead of Butler, I want to give Recluse. Because then the Imp goes, yeah, I was the Recluse. That's fine. I'm confirmed something. I think that's okay. I think that's not the biggest deal. Their main obstacle is going to be the Mayor. I think the Poisoner should be fine. And then based on whether or not the Ravenkeeper hits something good. If the Slayer does kill the Imp, then the Undertaker doesn't learn Imp Executed, which I think is really good for the evil team. We're also a bit light on information. It's relying entirely on the empath. And then if the imp does die and pass, there's the chef and the librarian for them to get to read to another evil player. So I think it's okay. I think this is balanced. I don't think it's too crazy. I think the librarian 0 will create a lot of doubt. And the evil team can potentially pick up on that and create a Baron narrative when there is no Baron. And potentially maybe convince the empath that they're the drunk. Maybe convince somebody else that they're the drunk. And potentially run away with it like that. Which I think is fine. I don't think this is too crazy. Alright, let me clear this. We'll do one more. I think, actually, I might add a player here. Gather my players. Add a seat. Okay. Because we want to do the Spy Baron setup, which will give us 3. Which I think is fine. I think I just go Recluse as a bluff. You make a drunk somewhere. I think Washerman's fine here because there's going to be a low townsfolk count. Confirming one of them is going to be good. With the Baron, because the number of townsfolk is less than usual, having a washerwoman make trust amongst the townsfolk be slightly higher is good, I think. If there's no Recluse, I think maybe skip Empath. I do like Fortune Teller here. We do have the Spy to ping something off. I can make the Librarian see the Spy as a Recluse. That would be kind of funny. I think Ravenkeeper is fine here. The Ravenkeeper is likely to survive until final day because of the Spy. And then Undertaker. I can potentially do the Investigator on the Spy and the Undertaker. But then the Ravenkeeper in that game just goes, why? Why am I here? I think it's a bit rough. I like the Slayer here. Let's have a look at what this looks like. Okay. I think this is fine. So we can... Let's look at bluffs first. So I like giving Recluse here. I need to assign someone to be the drunk. I don't think Chef helps. I don't think Chef as a bluff helps. I think Investigator does. I think it's incredibly rare that I give the Virgin as a bluff. I think Mayor is the correct choice. The Spy is going to know all of the not in play characters anyway. I think this is fine. Let's start with our Librarian. What we initially said was we were going to have the Spy register as a Recluse. I'm then happy to give the Baron as the other one. So basically the evil team learns that there's a Librarian that knows there's an outsider in play, which is fine because there's supposed to be one by default. But then the one red is not any of the ones actually in play, which I think is interesting. We have a butler, we have a saint. And I think the goal here is to make the saint look as questionable as possible, I guess. I think this is the scenario where I would want to red herring the saint. I've already created doubt about the outside account, and we've set up a Recluse bluff within the evil team. The outside account cannot be 4. I can also just drunk the fortune teller, but I don't think I want to do that. So here's the other thing. Of my options, right? Who do I drunk here? I have the Ravenkeeper down in this corner. I think drunk Ravenkeeper is a fucking horrible choice at any given time. Just don't do that. Imagine you're the Ravenkeeper. You wait the whole game. You're playing the long game. You're waiting to die at night. The odds are bad because you're more likely to get executed. You finally die. You pick someone. and it makes you lose the game because you were the drunk all along and you just have no way of knowing it. Which I really hate. I really think that sucks. If the poisoner hits the Ravenkeeper or a spy poisoner work together to shut down a Ravenkeeper, that's two evil players playing a good game, and that's fine. A Ravenkeeper just showing up and then getting bamboozled, I think sucks. Which I think is fine. I think maybe Washerwoman. Drunk Washerwoman seeing and let him play Mayor. That could be brutal. But the thing is, the imp has to know to pick it up. Has to know to pick it up. I think it's fine. In the same way that I dislike the Ravenkeeper being the drunk, I dislike the Slayer being the drunk. I think the Undertaker and the Fortune Teller here are required for the game to be solvable by the good team. Because as you can see, there's not a lot of info here. And the Ravenkeeper is going to be really, really impactful. So I think... I think Drunk Washerwoman... What if the Washerwoman sees the librarian that misregisters on the spy so that the librarian knows that they can't be the drunk? That's still just evil focused. There was one thing that I did in a game recently where I made the fortune teller the drunk in a spy poisoner game. So the demon never killed the fortune teller because the spy was like, this person is the drunk, don't worry about him. But I gave the fortune teller correct information the entire time. It didn't actually help them solve the game. The fortune teller did in fact hit the demon and get a yes, and all the other people that they hit that were not the demon, they got a no. And they go, well, this is this thing. Yes, I got a yes on them. The demon then star passed, which made the information not very helpful in the end. And then the drunk fortune teller advocated for their own execution so that they wouldn't be suspicious on the final day. Okay, it was a strange choice, but you know, it worked out and the good team won in that game. So I do have the option of doing that, just having a drunk fortune teller, and then in that scenario, right, the spy sees this grimoire is the drunk. The spy sees this grimoire and goes, oh, okay, we have drunk fortune teller next to me, that's good. Oh, and the red herring is on the saint, that's even better. But as the drunk fortune teller, I can just make them not read the red herring. That's fine, that's the same as it malfunctioning. And I can continue to give the fortune teller good information. And the spy's not going to kill him because I think the fortune teller's going to get shit information. But there's no other information that's going to help them solve the game. The Undertaker is not proactive, it's retroactive. It doesn't narrow things down unless if the imp is executed and it's picked up by a Scarlet Woman. And it just kind of helps verify some of the other pieces of information are not the drunk. And the other thing is that like the fortune teller could get great info on the demon and then get executed. Undertaker sees drunk and then goes, oh, all this information is shit. It's not the demon. So you kind of do have a lot of power when it comes to the drunk to help the good team potentially, especially in the fortune teller, because the idea, and look, I get it, the point of the outsider is to help balance the numbers. You receive outsiders as an intermediary between adding more minions because minions are much more powerful. And your responsibility is not to play to the character types. Your responsibility is to run a balanced game. In this setup, there is not a lot of information that's going to help them solve the game. And so having a fortune teller who is actually going to potentially help the good team solve the game is going to be crucial here. And so I think this is at least an interesting choice. You know, the spy's not going to need to get them killed. All of the other setup is mostly misinformation. Just if the Ravenkeeper is going to get hit, or if they're going to try and trigger it early, or if it's going to be there on final day, all these different things I think will be interesting. I think this is an evil favored setup. Having the Baron on 11 is pretty rough generally. But then additionally setting up a narrative with a librarian to confirm a player that is not an in-play outsider is additionally punishing. So then going and doing other things to help the good team, like making the drunk not be super punishing, you know, a thing I have in my power, I think is a good choice. Because between the fortune teller and the slayer, they might be able to narrow down the game. The spy might get executed. Because there's the thing always of, oh, you're the recluse. What if we just killed you? And the spy's like, well, I have a fucking screenshot of the grimoire anyway. Go for it. That's fine. But then I can just show the Undertaker correct information. Show them the spy. And they go, oh, they were the recluse anyway. Of course I'm seeing spy. And that's fine, right? So I think a lot of this stuff just comes down to what are all the players expecting to happen. A lot of the time, players are going to expect Saint, going to expect Mayor, right, to be the red herring in this scenario. The fortune teller is the drunk, so that I can ignore the red herring, and that's fine. I would probably still show the imp as evil. I might maybe show the other evil players as evil if the good team's really far behind, just to help them maybe push through an execution. And then like the Slayer here and stuff like that is hopefully coming to help the good team narrow down what everyone is. Other things like I really like the butler and the librarian. The librarian saying the butler just creates a trust chain, and that's fine. The butler shouldn't be a character that's just never played. The butler and the way that it plays is I need to find one friend that I can trust that they are going to vote the way that I need to so that I can pick them forever. And I think in that sense, like if that's the thought of you going into it, because you know the pervading player sentiment is that, oh, the butler's broken. It's so gameable and cheatable. It's like, well, just fucking do not cheat and you'll be fine. Just find a friend, you know, just one of them, and then try and figure out how to vote successfully with them. I think works out. Doing stuff like this that sets up an evil team to have to bluff as the recluse instead of a good player who's like, well, I'm the recluse, I'm just unhelpful, please kill me, is much more dynamic and interesting. And then giving a lot of different options when it comes to what kind of information, where the players set up, and what kind of stuff is going on. This is a lot of the stuff that I'm thinking about. Like, really often the spy never actually registers as a spy. It's always seen as a townsfolk, and some information helps set up the game. Making the spy register as a recluse to a librarian, I think, is fine. It is an interesting way of doing something differently because they are more likely to get executed like that. But just having an investigator just fucking see the spy is also fine. What is a spy going to do? If you have an investigator see a poisoner, the poisoner's like, I don't want to get executed. I have poisoning to do. If the investigator sees a spy and the spy is like, well, just fucking kill me then. What does it matter? I already know everything I'm going to know. I'm not doing anything crazy after this. I already have the grimoire. I've already FedExed it to the imp. It's not a big deal. Just kill me. And so I think that's still fine. Like, these are just not choices that I've seen come up very often in playing games. And because it's explored space, right? The idea is these are veteran players. If they've played Trouble Brewing many times, you need to create a setup that puts them into a place that is unexplored space where they have the opportunity to try new things or set up plays that they haven't seen before, so it doesn't feel like the same predictable Trouble Brewing. They're not making the same things. They're not doing the stuff they've rehearsed several times. They're not playing, you know, just goofy chaos because they don't know what they're really supposed to be doing on this script. But that's kind of the idea. I hope this gives some of you storytellers some of the ideas, some of the things that I'm thinking about when it comes to doing a setup, because I have run a couple of Trouble Brewing games recently for more advanced players, and I have to be thinking about how am I going to make this interesting? How am I going to make this a balanced game for the good team? And as a storyteller, you have a lot more tools in your toolkit than you realize. You have a lot of power when it comes to putting all the things together and thinking about how you are going to set it all up, how you're going to make it happen, what narrative you are trying to set up. For example, this one is creating a fake recluse despite there being plenty of other outsiders in play, which gives the team an interesting solve because they know there can't be four and they know it's unlikely there's no drunk, so they're not going to trust all of the outsiders. Building a narrative like that, something that is balanced, doesn't put too much heat on the demon. The minions get to do their job of misdirecting things, create a bit of misinformation. That's all kind of happening. And then hopefully you will take this, you'll distill this information upon yourself, and you will hopefully be able to come up with some cool ideas to run some Trouble Brewing games for some of your more advanced players. Using some of those unused toolkit like Librarian Zero, like registering the spy as the spy to the investigator, or making the Undertaker be seen as the spy in the investigator ping. All of this stuff is cool tricks that I like to do when I'm running games like this, and so maybe you should try that out as well. And, you know, maybe in the comments, let me know what some of the coolest stuff that you've set up as a storyteller in Trouble Brewing. Is there a play that I think, you know, I want to try out? Is there something cool that you've done that you think worked out really well? I would love to know, because it's not just for me to discover everything. I love hearing about what's going on and finding out what cool things you are all working on as well. So definitely let me know. And while you're down there typing a fiery message, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. We just hit 500 recently, which I'm really proud of. And it's because of people like you that help me out after coming and watching the channel. So a lot of that is appreciated, but hopefully we'll see you back in our regular scheduled Clocktower programming every Wednesday, 3 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, because we're posting in the American time zones. Every week we have a video scheduled to come out every week until July 2025. So keep your eyes peeled for that. We have a lot of cool, exciting games coming, of cool custom scripts, a lot of funky stuff, and maybe some advanced games of Trouble Brewing. So I'll hopefully see you then.